Good morning. This is Mission Control Houston on Tuesday, August 27th, 2019. We are live here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room with a live view of the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft in the grasp of the Canadarm2 robotic arm. This morning, we're bringing you live coverage of the release of Dragon from the International Space Station for its return to Earth with almost 2,700 pounds of research and return cargo.
If you have any additional comm.
To accommodate for better lighting conditions this morning, Dragon's departure was pushed back a little more than 10 minutes, and the release window is now scheduled to open at 9:59 a.m. Central Time. Shortly after Dragon is released, it will conduct a series of 3 departure burns or firings of its main engine to move a safe distance away from the space station and exit the approach ellipsoid for its return back to Earth, ending in a parachute-assisted splashdown in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Southern California later this afternoon. We'll be taking some Ask NASA questions throughout the broadcast this morning, so if you have a question, be sure to submit it through social media using the hashtag AskNASA and watch to see if your questions get answered during our coverage today. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, today's release is being controlled by ground controllers here. Teams are being led by Flight Director TJ Kramer, joined on console to his right by Capcom Travis Fitzgerald. You'll hear Fitzgerald talking to the station crew from time to time as teams go through procedures for Dragon's release today. And on the robotics console is robotics officer David Gruntz. He'll be the one to send the commands to open the snares on the end effector of the Canadarm2 robotic arm to allow Dragon to be set free for its return to Earth today. And over in Hawthorne, California, SpaceX Mission Director Christian Ramirez is leading teams in the SpaceX Flight Control Room. Teams there will be taking over Dragon's operations once it departs the vicinity of the International Space Station all the way through its splashdown in the Pacific Ocean later this afternoon. Dragon's journey to the International Space Station began on July 25th when the spacecraft launched on a Falcon 9 rocket from the Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. The spacecraft lifted off over the Florida coast with about 5,000 pounds of science investigations and supplies to begin its 2-day journey to the International Space Station. Dragon then arrived to its capture point about 2 days later, on July 27th, with Expedition 60 flight engineer Nick Hague at the controls of the Canadarm2 robotic arm for capture, as NASA astronaut Christina Cook backed him up and monitored systems. And a few hours after capture, Dragon was installed to the Earth-facing port of the station's Harmony module. A key item in Dragon's unpressurized cargo section was the International Docking Adapter 3, or IDA-3, which was installed by NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Andrew Morgan during last week's 6.5-hour spacewalk. The IDA-3 will serve as a second port of call for the future arrivals of commercial crew vehicles. Taking another live look at the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft in the grasp of the Canadarm2 robotic arm. Again, Dragon is returning to Earth later today with about 2,700 pounds of research and return cargo. About 5 hours after Dragon departs from the station, it will conduct a deorbit burn, which will last about 12 minutes and 45 seconds. It'll then take about 30 minutes for Dragon to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere for its parachute-assisted splashdown about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California, later this afternoon around 3:20 p.m. Central. And earlier this morning at 7:25 a.m. Central Time, flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston used the space station's Canadarm2 robotic arm to detach Dragon from the Earth-facing side of the station's Harmony module and maneuvered the vehicle into its release position where you see it now. Taking another live look at the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft as the Dragon cargo craft and the International Space Station head toward the southern part of Africa. Again, Dragon right now in its release position, ready to go today. Once the release window for Dragon opens up this morning, which is scheduled to take place around 9:59 a.m. Central Time, Robotics Officer David Gruntz here in Mission Control Houston will send commands to open up the snares on the end effector of the Canadarm2 robotic arm to allow Dragon to be set free for its return to Earth. Dragon will then conduct a series of 3 departure burns or firings of its main engine to move a safe distance away from the station and to exit what's called the approach ellipsoid, which serves as a mythical cone around the station that's referred to as the neighborhood of the International Space Station. Once Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid, NASA's tasks as part of the joint mission operations will be complete, as flight controllers in the SpaceX Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California, take over operations of the Dragon cargo craft from there. Again, Dragon is still attached to the Canadarm2, as it will be for the next about 30 minutes before it's released for its return to Earth later today, carrying about 2,700 pounds of research and return cargo. Among that research and return cargo are samples, hardware, and data from completed investigations. One of those investigations is space moss, which is returning on Dragon today, comparing mosses grown aboard the space station with those grown on Earth to determine how microgravity affects growth, development, and other features. Crew members fixed some of those mosses using a chemical fixation bag and stored the rest for live return today. We're getting a view now of what's called the Cuckoo workstation inside the cupola on board the International Space Station. This is the same view NASA astronaut Christina Cook is getting now as she monitors systems and backs up robotics ground controllers here in Mission Control Houston. Yesterday marked the halfway point of Cook's long-duration mission, and she's slated to set the record for the longest single space flight by a woman, with an expected total of 328 days in space. It looks like we have our first Ask NASA question from Pierre. He asked, do the astronauts have actions with Dragon, or is it all controlled from Earth? Since Dragon is an uncrewed resupply craft, it's mainly controlled by ground controllers, but astronauts do get to take part in the capture and installation on board the station, as well as departure. As I just mentioned, Christina Cook is in the cupola workstation on board the International Space Station, monitoring systems for departure today. Again, we'll be taking some Ask NASA questions throughout the broadcast today. If you have a question, be sure to submit it on social media using the hashtag AskNASA, and be sure to stay tuned in to see if your question gets answered on air today. Taking a live look now inside the SpaceX flight control room in Hawthorne, California. Teams there will be taking over Dragon's operations once it departs the vicinity of the International Space Station all the way through its splashdown in the Pacific Ocean later this afternoon. Again, Dragon is still attached to the Canadarm2, as it will be until that release window opens up at about 9:59 a.m. Central Time this morning, before it's released for its return to Earth later today, carrying about 2,700 pounds of research and return cargo.
The filtering valve is in process, and the newly installed serial number is 46.
We copy. Sounds good. Thanks, Nick.
You betcha. My pleasure.
Getting another live look of what's called the Cuckoo workstation on board the International Space Station inside the cupola. This is the same view NASA astronaut Christina Cook is getting now as she monitors systems and backs up robotic ground controllers here in Mission Control Houston. And Flight Director TJ Creamer is taking a final go, no-go poll from flight controllers around the room here in Mission Control Houston to make sure all systems are a go before the release of Dragon this morning. And it looks like we have another Ask NASA question. This one comes from Felix. He asks how long it takes from the release of Dragon to return to Earth. About 5 hours after Dragon departs from the station today, it'll conduct a deorbit burn, which will last about 12 minutes and 45 seconds. It then takes about 30 minutes for Dragon to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere for its parachute-assisted splashdown about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California, later this afternoon, around 3:20 p.m. Central Time. So the release of Dragon today, after the release of Dragon today, it'll take about 5.5 hours for Dragon to splash down. Again, we'll be taking some Ask NASA questions throughout the broadcast this morning, so if you have a question, be sure to submit your question through social media using the hashtag AskNASA.
Houston Station 2 for recycle tank drain.
Houston is go per step 2.5.
Thank you.
And back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, Flight Director TJ Creamer is taking a final go, no-go poll from flight controllers around the room to make sure all systems are a go before the release of Dragon this morning. And taking another look at the SpaceX Flight Control Room over in Hawthorne, California.
Houston Station 2 for the tank drain.
Go ahead.
Travis, the so I guess step 2.8.1 serial number is 1254.
That's a good one. Go to continue.
Copy.
Station Houston, Space Ground 2 for Christina. We are go for Dragon configuration checks. Perform step 2 and 1.602 Dragon release and departure monitoring.
And station copies. I'm go for step 2 and 1.602.
You just heard that call from Capcom Travis Fitzgerald, letting Christina Cook in the cupola on board the International Space Station know that Dragon is a go for an on-time departure today.
Houston Station on 2 and step 2 of 1.602 for Dragon release. I can verify that LiDAR 1 is indicated as primary sensor. The light on SpaceX Dragon is visible, and the CCP LED status is as expected.
Houston copies. Good report.
Again, ground controllers here in Mission Control Houston and Hawthorne, California, reporting Space Station and Dragon systems are both a go for departure this morning. We have another Ask NASA question. This one comes from SpaceFan1 asking where SpaceX Dragon will land. Dragon's parachute-assisted splashdown is scheduled to happen around 3:20 p.m. Central Time, about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California. Getting another live look now of what's called the Cuckoo Workstation inside the cupola on board the International Space Station. This is the same view NASA astronaut Christina Koch is getting now as she monitors systems and backs up ground controllers here in Mission Control Houston. And we're now about 10 minutes out from the release window opening. Again, standing by now for that release window to open, which is slated to happen at 9:59 a.m. Central Time. After the release window opens, Robotics Officer David Gruntz here in Mission Control will send commands to open up the snares on the end effector of the Canadarm2 robotic arm to allow Dragon to be set free for its return to Earth. Dragon will then conduct a series of 3 departure burns or firings of its main engine to move a safe distance away from the station and to exit what's called the approach ellipsoid, which serves as a mythical cone around the station that is referred to as the neighborhood of the International Space Station. Once Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid, NASA's tasks as part of the joint mission operations will be complete as flight controllers in the SpaceX Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California, take over operations of the Dragon cargo craft. Again, the Dragon cargo craft is still attached to the Canadarm2 as it will be for the next few minutes before it's released for its return to Earth later today, carrying about 2,700 pounds of research and return cargo. Another investigation returning to Earth on Dragon today is the Goodyear tire investigation, which evaluates the creation of silica fillers using traditional techniques, but in microgravity, potentially yielding results not possible on Earth. After processing, the 6 rubber samples return via cold stowage to the Goodyear Research Facility for analysis. Also returning on Dragon today is the pilot study with the Crew Interactive Mobile Companion, a technology demonstration project and an observational study that aims to obtain the first insights into the effects on crew support by an artificial intelligence. That artificial intelligence could provide operational support that reduces the amount of stress and workload on human crew members. Again, these are only a few of the science investigations returning to Earth on Dragon today for further analysis and results. The International Space Station continues to serve as an essential test bed for people on Earth and in orbit as we continue to move forward, placing the first woman and the next man on the Moon and eventually Mars.
Station Houston, Space to Ground 2 for Christina. Go for Dragon departure on time. Perform steps 3 and 4 in 1.602 Dragon release and departure monitoring.
Copy the go into step 3.
You just heard that call from Capcom Travis Fitzgerald confirming to Christina Cook in the cupola on board the International Space Station that Dragon is indeed a go for departure on time today. And we're about 2 minutes out now from the release window opening. We're 1 minute out now from the release window opening.
Station Houston, Space Ground 2 for Christina. ISS thrusters are inhibited and ground M1 is go for release on time. Next calls will be from Robo.
Station copies, and we're ready.
We are now officially in the release window itself, expecting an on-time release at 9:59 a.m. Central Time.
Station copies.
Release commanded.
Copy.
Snares open. Begin monitoring for drift out.
Work.
The snares are now open and release has been confirmed at 9:49 a.m. Central Time as the International Space Station and Dragon were flying 256 statute miles above the Pacific Ocean.
Station on 2 for Dragon. The pin has exited the lead. Go for back away.
Robo copies. Proceeding with back off.
That backaway call from NASA astronaut Christina Cook in the cupola at the robotic workstation on board the International Space Station. She will now maneuver the Canadarm2 robotic arm to back away from the vicinity of Dragon, setting the stage for a series of 3 departure burns.
M2 copies. Station on 2 for Dragon. 1.5 meters.
Houston copies.
You can see the arm slowly backing away from Dragon now.
Station on 2 for Dragon. I see 4.5 meters. Proceeding with depart command at step 4.
Houston copies.
And now standing by for the first in a series of 3 departure burns to begin. Depart burn 1 has started.
Houston Station, Dragon depart commanded.
Houston copies. Houston Station on 2, departure burn 1 is complete. Departure burn 2 in approximately 1 minute. Monitor per step 5 and 1.602.
Houston copies.
Station Houston on 2, back away complete.
Houston copies.
You just heard the first burn is now complete. That was only a 6-second burn. The second of 3 burns is planned just moments from now. That one will be a little longer in duration of 11 seconds.
Station Houston Space Ground 2, ISS thrusters are enabled.
Houston copies.
The second of 3 burns is now underway.
Station Houston Space Ground 2, departure burn 2 is complete. Departure burn 3 in approximately 7 minutes. Monitor per step 6 and 1.602.
Houston copies.
And you just heard confirmation that was a good burn. The third in the series of burns to complete Dragon's departure from the station is planned about 7 minutes from now, and that will be a little longer in duration, about 21 seconds, completing the opening rate required for Dragon to depart the approach ellipsoid. Again, Dragon has one more burn to depart the vicinity of the International Space Station. After that third burn, Dragon will be a safe distance away from the station for its deorbit burn around 2:30 p.m. Central Time this afternoon. That will be a 12-minute, 47-second braking maneuver by Dragon's engine to slow it down, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its descent back to Earth and a parachute-assisted splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California. Again, Dragon is returning to Earth later today with about 2,700 pounds of research and return cargo. Some of that is critical science experiments, spare parts, and other equipment to be refurbished and returned to the station at a later date. Once Dragon splashes down in the Pacific Ocean later this afternoon, it will be recovered by the SpaceX recovery team in the splashdown zone about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California. Again, we're coming up on the third departure burn by Dragon. Again, that third burn will be about 21 seconds in duration. And depart burn 3 has started. And the third burn is complete.
Station Houston, Space Ground 2, departure burn 3 is complete. Dragon is outside the keep out sphere.
Station copies.
And that was Capcom Travis Fitzgerald confirming the third stage burn is complete and Dragon is now outside the keep out sphere. Now just about 5 minutes away from Dragon, departing the approach ellipsoid, which serves as the mythical cone around the station referred to as the neighborhood, at which point integrated operations between the flight control team here in Houston and the SpaceX flight control team in Hawthorne will be complete. At that point, NASA's tasks as part of the joint mission operations will be complete as flight controllers in the SpaceX Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California take over operations of the Dragon cargo craft. Just to recap some of the milestones from our coverage so far today. Dragon was released from the Canadarm2 robotic arm at 9:59 a.m. Central Time. It then conducted a series of 3 departure burns to move away from a safe distance away from the station. Robotics Officer David Gruntz here in Mission Control Houston worked with Expedition 60 flight engineer Christina Cook in the cupola on board the International Space Station to back the arm away from Dragon. And Dragon is now on its way to exit the approach ellipsoid out of the vicinity of the International Space Station. It will then move a safe distance away from the station for its deorbit burn and parachute-assisted splashdown later today.
Station Houston, Space Ground 2 for Nick and the recycle tank drain.
You on 2, Travis?
Yeah, Nick, we're not seeing a good flow with that recycle tank drain. We'd like to see if you can check the cap in 2.8.5 of that procedure.
The views we're getting now are dark as the International Space Station and Dragon fly through an orbital nighttime. Because the space station orbits the Earth about 6 times a day, there are points throughout the broadcast when we'll be in direct light of the sun and other times when it will be completely dark as the station moves through orbital daytimes and nighttimes. Again, standing by now for Dragon to depart the approach ellipsoid.
Station Houston, Space Ground 2 for Christina. Dragon is outside the approach ellipsoid on a safe 24-hour free drift trajectory. And with that, we are done with your activity related to this. Thank you so much.
Station copies, and we are very appreciative of a successful Dragon mission, and it was our pleasure to participate, and we were glad to conduct all the excellent science as a part of this mission, and we look forward to more in the future.
Houston copies and concurs.
And that was Capcom Travis Fitzgerald confirming that Dragon is now outside the approach ellipsoid, and a bid farewell to Dragon from astronaut Christina Cook. Dragon will now be commanded by flight controllers in the SpaceX Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California, to execute a 12-minute and 47-second deorbit burn around 2:30 p.m. Central Time today. That will slow Dragon down by just over 113 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its descent back through the Earth's atmosphere and a parachute-assisted splashdown in the Pacific Ocean about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California, around 3:20 p.m. Central Time today. Recapping some of the events from today, earlier this morning at 7:25 a.m. Central Time, flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston used the space station's Canadarm2 robotic arm to detach Dragon from the Earth-facing side of the station's Harmony module and maneuver the vehicle into its release position. Dragon was set free at 9:49 a.m. Central Time as the International Space Station and Dragon were flying 256 statute miles above the Pacific Ocean. Robotics Officer David Gruntz here in Mission Control Houston sent commands to open up the snares on the end effector on the Canadarm2 robotic arm that held Dragon in place after it was maneuvered into its release position for departure this morning. Dragon then executed a series of 3 departure burns to move to a safe distance away from the station, where it will continue to move for the next several hours before its deorbit burn at 2:30 p.m. Central Time later this afternoon. Dragon's parachute-assisted splashdown is scheduled to happen around 3:20 p.m. Central Time, about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California. The SpaceX recovery team is on the scene in the splashdown recovery zone, ready to retrieve Dragon and its nearly 2,700 pounds of cargo and science investigations. Dragon will then make its nearly 48-hour trip back to the port for unstowing of that research and return cargo. And with Dragon now safely on its way back to Earth, that'll wrap up our release coverage for today. This is Mission Control Houston.